Hello there, I'm Blackbright, broadcasting out of the UK. Welcome to my channel. If it's the first time you're passing through, thank you. And you're welcome to subscribe to support the channel. You can share it and you can put the thumbs up or the thumbs down, whatever way you wish. Now, racism is a very uncomfortable subject, and a lot of people do not want to broach it for a variety of reasons. I've had a couple of black people, subscribers, saying, it's lowering their vibrations. Another one saying it's negative. And you'll find with affluent black people, they really do not like when racism is brought to the surface, because some of them feel as though it's kind of drawing attention to themselves, and they'd much rather prefer to think that it doesn't exist, that they're doing well, that they've got a lovely home, a lovely family, a good job. And so therefore, it's the underprivileged that suffer racism. Those people who are wayward, they haven't got much to do and they look like thugs on the street. So they'd like to think that those are the people who experience racism, and therefore it doesn't have anything to do with them. And so they, like some white people, think, black people who are victims of racism are often deserving of it. So what I want to do is really talk about this uncomfortable conversation, this conversation that makes even black people who are openly victims of racism feel uncomfortable to talk about it. And normally they don't want to talk about it because they feel as though it doesn't make a difference. Nobody's listening. Everybody has the same viewpoint of why they've been picked on, why they've been stopped by police. It's the way you look. It's what you've got on. You're drawing attention to yourself by wearing hoodies and wearing black clothes and stuff like that. The normal things that they believe, the stereotype, will draw attention. I did a poem quite a number of years ago, probably over 10 years ago actually, and I want to read it to you before I go into the video. It's called Anesthetize Racism. Black men, white women, black women, white men should not be condemned for interacting and becoming friends. Inject forgiveness into the bloodstream, puncture the skin with wisdom. Eradicate stigmas, eliminate dogmas, and anesthetize racism. Prick us with enlightenment, numb the nerve endings of alienation, desensitize the pain of rejection, and anesthetize racism. No one is better than the other. We are all brothers and sisters in the eyes of the Father. We were all born of women, and we will all die one day. So anesthetize racism and cast ignorance away. Now, like I said, I've done that years ago, but I thought it was very appropriate for current times. And I called this video The Trickle of Racism because sometimes we don't realize how it affects us. For example, I have been called a wog, I think maybe once or twice in my lifetime. But that doesn't mean that I have not been a victim of racism in other ways. And sometimes when I say it's the trickle of racism, it's the innuendos. It's, like when you're walking down the street, even before social distancing, and you would see somebody kind of distance themselves from you or hold their bags, and you kind of accept it and you say, oh, you're going to step away because that you're trying to protect them from feeling uncomfortable, but you're rejecting the way it makes you feel. And the other day I walked outside my house, and I normally walk around the park, and I'd never noticed that flag, the English flag, just the red and white flag. And I thought to myself, maybe they're racist, maybe they're not, but that flag, as opposed to the Union Jack, kind of it's an unspoken message, or to some people, it reflects a different kind of, it doesn't reflect unity when you've got flags hanging out of people's windows down a particular street. So then I knew that when I saw that flag, it made me feel uncomfortable. That might be my own issues, but what I'm talking about is a trickle of racism. So I decided I'm not going to walk down that road anymore. I'm not going to put myself in the line of fire, just in case. And what I'm saying is that it's really quite a bizarre situation. It's like, you know, when you're growing up and, you know, your parents kind of say to you, you know, you have to work so much harder as a black person to get the same result. And how do you think that reflects in when you're going for an interview? Often wondered, I am so competent in so many areas of my life. I do these videos, I run a magazine, I DJ, I've written a couple of books, and yet when I go for an interview, I shut down. And I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I was saying, and she was having the same experience. And I said, I don't know why that happens. I know my job, and it's not even like it's complex questions that they're asking me. They're asking me basic questions that I know the answers to. My mind goes blank and I shut down. And she was saying that she went to a webinar and they had a couple of counsellors and I think a couple of health professionals, a couple of lawyers and some doctors. And they were discussing this COVID-19 and they were discussing racism in the workplace. And one of the people on the panel were talking about interviews and saying how the black person, when they go for an interview, they have an innate feeling of inferiority. And so when they sit in a panel, they do not feel comfortable, and it's almost as though they are meant to pull things out the bag and they shut down. And what's normally uncomfortable is that sometimes they put a black person on the panel, and that's supposed to make you feel as though there's an element of fairness. But the person that they tend to put on the black person they tend to put on the panel is someone who is more likely to want to prove that they're not favouring a black person over a white person. So they give you a harder time, and so you don't feel as though you've got anyone on your side. And, you know, they were talking about the kinds of black people that there are that have different experiences. Like you'll see a lot of black people in, especially in, I'm not talking about sportsmen or sports or arts and stuff like that. But when you're thinking about black, a lot of these people are representing government and stuff. A lot of them come from African backgrounds. And African backgrounds have a totally different experience from black Caribbean backgrounds. And I find black Africans are much more confident. Got something in my throat. Are much more confident in their self-portrayal. And it's got something to do with the way they're raised that is different from a black Caribbean. So when you're looking at directors and a lot of these massive producers, I'm not talking about Americans now, I'm just talking about in England, they're normally black Africans. And black Africans, because they have a different experience that, number one, it's hard to explain really, because I'm trying to say that a black African family, they promote a lot of education and they never ever feel as though they're inferior. Where there's something about not all, a lot of Caribbean families that came over to the UK who felt beholden to the white person who kind of brought them into the country, and therefore they taught their children to be beholden to white people. And so a lot of black Caribbean children who grow up as adults do not have that same element of confidence that black African children have. And so some people will say, oh, well, look, you've got a black person over there and look what they're doing. They've achieved this, they've achieved that, they've achieved this. And how come, you're saying that black people don't have opportunities? And that's what I mean. It's sometimes, it's all different parts of the same thing. So you do have people who are racist. You do have parents who have not taught their children to value themselves and to think the best of themselves, and taught them how to do better. Like my mother had never said to me, oh, well, the thing is, no, she did. My mother was always she always wanted me to be a lawyer. That's ironic, isn't it? But she always wanted me to be a lawyer. But I think the difference between black Africans is that their parents encourage them with education. If they don't do anything else, that is the fish that they give them. That is the fishing rod that they give them. Caribbean parents give us the fish. African parents give them the rod. And so you see different outcomes. So an African person, once they have education underneath their belt, they're able to do whatever it is they desire to do. When a black Caribbean decides to take a fishing rod, it's usually of their own volition, their own desire to do better, not normally because the Caribbean parent has encouraged them to do that. And I'm talking about the ones in the UK as opposed to the ones in America. And maybe that's just my experience. But my experience is a lot of my colleagues or my peers' experiences, where our parents wanted us to go to work as soon as possible, help with the bills and help, show us responsibility in that way. So where am I going with this? I think I've gone off track a little bit. So I was talking about the interview now. So even though I'm competent, I have this innate feeling that I don't know the answers. I just shut down. And I'm not quite sure where that comes from. And I don't want to be a victim. I don't want to say, oh, that's racism, because it never even occurred to me. It just occurred to me that, I just shut down for some reason. And I don't consciously go into an interview thinking, oh, they're better than me. I do go into an interview knowing that they're going to judge me. And if I feel as though they're judging me based on my race or the fact that they do not know that I am competent, and I have to articulate how competent I am, and I'm not very good, well, I don't know if I'd be better now since I've been in the videos, but I was never good in the past. I haven't had to do an interview for 10 years. So I might be a lot better now. But my point is that it's not a conscious thing. So that's why I say when it trickles, whether it's through your parents or whether it's through the education system, it trickles until it builds up. And then we build up blockages so that when we're in certain situations, we try to fend off blockages that we've created ourselves or blockages that have been placed within us. So it will take a unified effort to kind of eradicate racism, because a part of it, we're responsible ourselves. A part of it, it's our environment. And a part of it is legislation. So it is very, very difficult to know what to hone in on. I think for a lot of us, we have to start rechecking ourselves and finding out what it means to be equal. It's fine fighting for equality, but if you do not believe you are equal because of years and centuries of programming, if they give you equality, you're not going to recognize it. So you need to feel equal and know that you are equal so that when you go for a job, you don't clam down. And when you are offered an opportunity, you don't instinctively think, oh, I'm not going to get it because I'm black. You know what I mean? Because that then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's going to project in your presentation and, yeah, you won't get it. And then you're going to say, oh, it's because I'm black. when really it's your own blockages, things that you've built up within yourself that prevents you from moving forward. There are some physical blockages. There are some obvious blockages that we know about, but we have to really start working within ourselves. As they say, free yourself from mental slavery. So you have to start thinking about that freedom and what it means to you to be free. Yes, you can go out and protest and hope that will bring about change, and I'm sure it will. But that doesn't have to be, I don't believe that vandalism needs to be involved in that, because it just gives them an excuse to make you look bad. So it's about, like I've said in previous videos, knowing what you want, respecting yourself and demanding respect. And not perpetuating the stereotype, because they have this stereotype that, you know, black people are angry, they're violent, they're ignorant, they're, you know, all of these stereotypes. And you don't want to be viewed as the stereotype. So you really need to kind of check yourself, build yourself up, and kind of analyze who you want to be and what can be put in place for you to be that person. You know, there's a lot of things that you can do. Whether you were miseducated as a young person in the past, you can re-educate yourself in the present. And I think that re-education is important. I do not like to read. I keep saying that. We have different kinds of learners. People say, oh, you've got to read in order to be this and that. No, you just need to be able to absorb information and recall it at will. Now, some people, you have visual learners, you have people, all people who like audio, and you have people who like to read. You know, none is less than the other, as long as you're learning. So you've got no excuse. You know, most of the books that are out now, you can get them on audio. You don't have to sit and read them. You can actually listen to them. Sometimes it's a disadvantage, because if I do not like a voice that is reading, I switch off. So it's important that the voice is right. But what I'm trying to say is that you've got no excuse not to re-educate yourself. I also think black people, when I'm talking about trickling racism, they tend to do more. Yes, we were told that a black person has to work twice as hard or 3 times as hard in order to get the same amount of pay as a white person and the same amount of recognition. But I think we also factor that into our mindset. And it's interesting because I've reduced my hours temporarily. And my line manager is always saying to me, look, we know we do not expect you to do the work you did for a whole day within your reduced hours. And I'll acknowledge it and say, yeah, but what do I tell myself? I tell myself, I've got to do as much as possible. Otherwise, they're not going to want to keep me. It's going to reflect on me if I do not do what I am meant to be, you know, what they give me to do. And the thing is that it's weird, because the way I translate it is that if you do not want me to do, if you don't want me to do as much in my reduced hours as I do in my full-time hours, I'm asking myself, why are you giving me my full-time work? To me, if you're giving me my full-time work, you are putting pressure on me to complete that work. But that is me. That's not them. That is because that is the way my mindset works. And because I'm given something, I push myself to do it. I do not want to be seen as a failure. And for me, that is a failure if I do not get my work done. So I will do extra hours in order to complete my work. And I won't claim for those hours, because as far as I'm concerned, I want to be seen as being that person who has done her work. But what I'm trying to say is that it's that mindset. I don't think a white person would think like that. If a white person is booked for 4 hours a day, I think, unless they just want to finish something off, they would do those 4 hours a day. And then they're like, 12 o'clock, I'm gone. But it's that, that indoctrination from our parents or wherever it came from, that we need to do better. We need to do more to be kept, or need to prove ourselves all the time, forever proving ourselves. And so I didn't really kind of factor it in as a form of a trickle. And that's not racism. Sometimes it's not even about racism. Sometimes it's just about being black and the black experience. Because the people around you don't even know what you're going through. They don't even know the turmoil you're going through. And when they're talking to you on a level, they're just talking to you on a level. But it's how black people interpret what is being said to them because of their history, because of their experiences, because of what they've been taught, and because of how they've been programmed. So sometimes, like with the police officers, yeah, that's overt racism. And when people call you niggers, that's overt racism. When they manufacture and contrive legislation, that's covert racism. But the way we interpret what is happening to us is our responsibility as black people. And as they say, what you conceive is what you achieve, or whatever they say. But what I'm trying to say is that however we interpret what somebody says to us is our interpretation. And sometimes if you're sensitive, you can pick up on all kind of innuendos, but you cannot kind of just jump to the conclusion it means something when maybe it doesn't. But that's why I'm saying the trickle of racism kind of affects the way you think. It affects the way how you interpret messages. And it affects the way you believe whether somebody is genuine or not. And it affects the way whether or not you feel you can trust somebody or not. And when trust comes in, trust comes in all colours. It's not just whether or not you can trust white people, it's whether or not you can trust black people. It's whether or not you can trust your parents, those you love, all kinds of things. But the fact of the matter is, it's all of these programs, all of these systems that we may not think about that make us feel the way we feel and make us react the way we do. And I think the triggers, like what happened to George Floyd, and when we see the police acting out with violence against innocent protesters, it kind of reinforces the negative aspects of racism and unfair white people in our mindset. And then we create this narrative and you try to accord it with all of our experience that we've had. I don't even know if that makes sense, to be honest, but hopefully it does. So I don't think a lot of white people are saying they're ashamed because of what happened. I don't think they should be ashamed because they are not directly responsible for what the bad eggs do. They're responsible only if they stand and watch that kind of behaviour, like those 3 police officers. If you become complicit, then you should feel ashamed. If you see an injustice done, but that doesn't matter whether you're black or white, it's still the same. Don't stand by and watch injustices. Don't stand by and watch racism. Don't stand by and watch any, children being abused or children being shouted at or children, anything like that. When you see an injustice, stand up for it in whichever way, and you can stand up for it just by taking a video or a snapshot. You don't even have to speak anymore. All you've got to do is take out your camera and video the injustice and put it on Facebook, and you have spoken. You have stood up. So you don't have to get involved anymore, because that is what has prevented a lot of people. They don't want to get involved. It's dangerous to get involved. But if you witness an injustice, please do take out your video, because now I think that is one of, I know in America, that is one of the key changes, that videos are now going to constitute evidence and police officers are going to be immediately suspended without pay. So now the roof has been lifted. I'm really looking forward to conversations about race not being so difficult, conversations about racism not being so difficult, because it's difficult on both sides. It's difficult on the black side because we don't want to come over as victims, even though we have been victims, but not all of us have been victims. But, you know, once, you know, a kind of a group of black people have been victims and the rest of the black people do not feel safe. So it's fine. You can stand on one side and say it's not happening to you. But the fact that it's happening to a minority of black people, it could just as well happen to you. The same way as it happened to that black guy who was driving to work. You don't have to fit the stereotype for injustice to stand at your door. So that is why black people get so uncomfortable with this situation of racism. And so do Asians, but Asians admit that their racism is totally different from the black experience. I mean, a black person, they're going to a shop and they're being watched, they're being scrutinized. For some people, they see a black person, they're holding onto their bag even more tightly. We're looked at as suspicious. We're looked on, and it's not nice. And we are constantly having to defend ourselves against just being black. And that's the hardest thing. And it's that self-defense against our blackness that makes it so difficult for us. And it trickles down in our psyche and makes us feel as though we are protecting white people from ourselves by standing back, by keeping out of the way, by keeping a low profile. And those that do speak up or speak out, they're the ones that are seen as violent and aggressive. And I was watching Good Morning Britain the other day, and there was this guy, and he was talking to some aggressive protesters in America. And one of the presenters said, "Oh, that was really violent. Weren't you afraid?" And the guy says, "No, I wasn't afraid." He said, "Those are people who have been trying to speak and nobody's been listening. And when nobody listens, it turns into frustration, and frustration turns into rage. And all they want to know is that somebody is listening. So no, I wasn't afraid." But to a white person looking at that, they're going to think, bloody hell, they're going to kill each other. And I think that is most of the times what policemen see. When they see a black man shouting or a black woman with a big mouth, I mean, they say black people are aggressive. I'd like to say they're passionate. But when you see them and they can look physically threatening. But most of the time you hear them out and it just it subdues. And it's like, a lot of time in relationships, black on black relationships, a lot of black men won't deal with black women because they say we're too aggressive, because they don't want to hear that loudness, that passion, they don't want to hear that. They much prefer to hear a covert type of aggression, because it doesn't make them feel so threatened. But there's something about black men that comes over as aggressive to white men and white women. And there's something about black women that comes over as aggressive and threatening to black men. And it's really quite ironic. But really, once you get to the root that just hear us out, just let us air and vent, and then it comes back. Don't be afraid. But it's the fear that causes death a lot of the time. Fear of the unknown. Fear of not knowing what to expect. And like the police have been taught, kill without hesitation. If you feel threatened, kill. And so if black people are perceived as threatening just by their very nature, what do you think is going to happen to them? Anyway, I don't know if what I've said made sense, but I hope it does. At least I hope you get something out of it. And that's all for now. Bye-bye.